Have you ever watched a lawyer in a courtroom, calm, collected, unshaken, while the other side is loud, emotional, and losing ground without even realizing it? Here's the truth. Those courtroom skills aren't just for lawyers. They work everywhere, in arguments, relationships, workplace conversations, and even those moments where someone tries to talk over you. Because communication, at its core, isn't about being right. It's about being effective. And some of the smartest people in the room aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who know when to pause, what to ask, and how to listen. So today, I'm going to give you 3 courtroom tricks that work in everyday conversations, not manipulation, not games, just calm, powerful communication that earns respect without raising your voice. Let's start with the first one. When most people hear the word pause, they think of silence. But in truth, a pause isn't empty. It's powerful. It's the difference between reacting and responding, between sounding defensive and sounding confident. In a courtroom, the best communicators know that the moment right before they speak is where their authority is built. They don't rush. They don't fill space just to sound in control. They use silence as a tool, because silence, when used right, makes people lean in. It makes every word that follows carry more weight. That same principle applies to you in every conversation. When someone challenges you, disagrees with you, or pushes your buttons, your instinct is to jump in, to correct, to defend. But the pause, that moment of quiet, that's where the power shifts. It's not weakness. It's restraint. It tells the other person, I'm not reacting to your energy. I'm choosing mine. That's what separates confidence from insecurity. The insecure rush to fill silence. They fear that quiet means they've lost control. But confident people, they understand silence means they're in command. Because silence shows emotional maturity. It's your way of saying, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to think. In that small window of time where you take a breath, collect your thoughts, and control your tone, you're doing something most people never master. You're removing emotion from decision making. You're not just responding to what they said. You're choosing how you want to sound and what you want to stand for. That pause also teaches the other person something subtle but powerful, that you don't rush to prove yourself, that your words are deliberate, not desperate. The next time someone tries to bait you into reacting quickly, try this. Just breathe. Look at them. Let that silence hang for a moment longer than feels comfortable. You'll notice something fascinating. They'll start to fill it. They'll soften their tone, clarify their point, or even start doubting their own aggression. Because silence creates space for truth to surface. It disarms chaos without confrontation. In those moments, you communicate without speaking. Your pause says, I'm calm, I'm composed. I'm not afraid of silence. And that scares insecure people more than any loud response ever could. It reminds them that they can't control you. Because the person who controls the pace controls the conversation. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means you're the one leading with discipline, not emotion. Think of the most confident people you've ever met. They don't rush to interrupt. They don't scramble for comebacks. They take their time. They understand that a second of silence can do more for their credibility than a minute of talking. They pause before answering tough questions, before responding to disrespect, before making promises. That pause gives them clarity, and clarity builds trust. So before you speak, pause. Not to hesitate, but to hold your ground. Because every time you choose silence over reaction, you're proving something to yourself, that you don't need to win the moment to own it. That confidence isn't about how fast you reply, but how well you respond. The pause isn't empty space, it's where your control lives. It's where your authority is born. And the longer you learn to sit in that stillness, the louder your presence becomes. Most people walk into a disagreement ready to defend, not to discover. They think the louder they speak, the clearer they'll be understood. But here's the truth. When you accuse, people protect themselves. When you ask, people open up. That's not weakness, that's strategy. Because questions don't just get answers, they lower walls. In a courtroom, the smartest communicators don't shout, "You're wrong!" They ask questions that guide the truth to reveal itself. They know that when someone feels attacked, their brain stops listening and starts defending. But when someone feels heard, they start explaining, and in their own explanation, they often expose the truth. That's why ask, don't accuse is one of the most powerful communication tools you can use anywhere, at work, at home, or even in conflict. When someone says something that doesn't sit right with you, your instinct might be to push back, to correct, to prove them wrong. But all that does is escalate the moment. Instead, try curiosity. Replace, why would you do that? Help me understand what made you decide that. Notice how different that feels. One sounds like an attack. The other sounds like interest. One makes people brace themselves. The other makes them breathe. Questions shift the energy of the conversation. They turn confrontation into cooperation. Because when you ask instead of accuse, you're not demanding an answer. You're inviting honesty. It changes the tone. You go from being an opponent to being someone who's trying to understand. And understanding doesn't mean agreeing. It means gathering clarity before reacting. The truth is, most arguments aren't about right and wrong. They're about not feeling seen or respected. A question does both. It shows you're calm enough to seek clarity and confident enough not to need immediate control. Think about it. What happens when you say, "You're lying"? The other person denies it. But when you say, "Can you walk me through that again?" Suddenly they have to think. They have to replay their own words. That's not manipulation, that's emotional intelligence. You're not feeding the fire, you're redirecting it. You're giving them room to reveal their inconsistencies without ever raising your voice. And that's where power really lies, not in dominance, but in discipline. Questions also keep your emotions in check, because when you're asking, you're thinking. You're giving your logical mind time to stay in control while your emotions cool off. Every time you choose curiosity over accusation, you're saying, "I care more about clarity than chaos." You're showing that your goal isn't to win, but to understand. And ironically, that's what makes you more persuasive. People listen to those who make them feel safe, not those who make them feel small. In conversations that start to heat up, try this. Instead of saying, "That's not true," ask, "What makes you think that?" Instead of, "You always do this," ask, "Do you notice this pattern too?" It sounds subtle, but it changes everything. You're giving the other person space to reflect, not react. You're slowing the pace. And in that pause, truth has a chance to show up. It's not about being passive. Accusations make noise. Questions make progress. They show confidence, because it takes real control to stay curious when your ego wants to fight. Anyone can point fingers. Few can stay composed enough to ask calmly. And those who do, they own the conversation without dominating it. When you master this skill, you'll notice something powerful. People start talking to you differently. They start lowering their tone, explaining more, and feeling safer around you. Why? Because questions signal emotional maturity. They say, "I'm not here to prove I'm right. I'm here to understand what's real." That's influence. That's connection. And in any conversation, that's how you win without ever having to fight. When tension rises in a conversation, most people think the key is to talk more, explain harder, or defend faster. But the truth is, the most powerful communicator in the room is the one who listens. Not just hears, but listens deeply enough to make the other person feel understood. And one of the simplest ways to do that is by repeating their words. It's not a trick, it's a skill. When you reflect back what someone just said, you're telling them, "I'm paying attention. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to understand you." And that instantly lowers their guard, because here's the thing. People don't argue to be right. They argue to be heard. When someone feels like you're really listening, their tone softens, their words slow down, and their defensiveness drops. Why? Because you've given them the one thing they didn't expect: respect. Repeating someone's words isn't agreement, it's acknowledgement. "You're right." You're saying, "I hear you." And when people feel heard, they naturally calm down. Think about the last argument you had. How many times did you stop and repeat what the other person said before responding? Probably never. Most of us listen to reply, not to understand. But when you repeat someone's words, even just a few, it buys you time. It gives you space to think, to breathe, to respond instead of react. It's emotional discipline disguised as empathy. For example, if someone says, "You never take my ideas seriously," the defensive instinct might be to say, "That's not true." But instead, try saying, "You feel like I don't take your ideas seriously." That one sentence flips the energy of the conversation. Suddenly, they feel heard. And when they feel heard, they become open to hearing you. That's communication judo, using understanding to redirect tension instead of pushing against it. Repeating someone's words also gives clarity to the moment. It helps both sides slow down and confirm what's really being said. Because sometimes conflict isn't caused by disagreement, it's caused by misunderstanding. When you reflect back their words, you hold up a mirror. You make sure you're both actually talking about the same thing before emotions twist it into something bigger. And that small step can stop so many arguments before they ever start. The best communicators do this naturally. They repeat phrases like, "So what I'm hearing is," or "It sounds like you're saying," or even just repeat the last few words the other person said. It's not robotic, it's respectful. It gives the other person the space to clarify or confirm, and it makes them feel seen. That simple act builds trust, and trust is what opens the door to real connection. There's another hidden power in this. It shifts control. When you're repeating their words, you're leading the rhythm of the conversation. You're not interrupting or escalating. You're steering it with calm precision. It tells the other person, I'm not here to attack. I'm here to understand. And that throws off anyone who's trying to argue emotionally. They can't fight calm. They can't overpower patience. This skill also works beautifully in professional settings. In meetings, when someone throws an idea or criticism your way, don't rush to justify. Repeat what they said. So you're suggesting we adjust the timeline, or you're saying the results didn't meet expectations. That move alone makes you look composed, intelligent, and confident. It shows leadership, because leaders don't panic when challenged, they clarify. Repeating someone's words can also reveal truth without confrontation. When you calmly echo back what someone said, they sometimes hear their own exaggeration or contradiction. You don't have to point it out, they realize it themselves. That's the beauty of reflection. You guide them toward self-awareness without ever arguing. It's subtle power, quiet, controlled, and deeply effective. And here's the secret. People mirror what they experience. When you show someone what it feels like to be listened to, they start listening to you too. You set the tone. You model composure. The energy of the conversation begins to match yours. That's how calm spreads, and that's how influence grows. Repeating someone's words may sound simple, but it's a discipline. It takes emotional control to pause, listen, and reflect instead of reacting. But when you do, you shift from fighting to leading. You create connection in place of conflict. And in every conversation, whether it's with a coworker, a partner, or even someone trying to provoke you, the one who listens the most always holds the most power. Most people walk into conversations with one mission: to win, to prove a point, to defend their position, to make sure the other person walks away knowing they were right. But here's the truth. When you chase being right, you often lose what matters most: connection. The goal in any conversation shouldn't be to win. It should be to be understood, because understanding builds bridges where arguments build walls. When your goal shifts from winning to understanding, everything about how you communicate changes. Your tone softens, your body language opens up. You start listening not to reply, but to connect. You stop seeing the other person as an opponent and start seeing them as another human being who just wants to be heard, just like you. And that shift doesn't make you weaker, it makes you wise. Because emotional intelligence isn't about outsmarting people, it's about out-understanding them. Think about how most arguments spiral. One person tries to dominate, the other resists, and suddenly both sides are fighting for control, not clarity. But what if, instead of trying to win, you try to understand what the other person is actually saying beneath their words? Because often, it's not about the surface topic at all. It's about feeling respected, valued, or acknowledged. When you understand that, you start communicating to connect, not to conquer. This is what the best communicators do. They step out of the boxing ring and into the same side of the table. They stop arguing about who's right and start asking, help me understand where you're coming from. That simple question disarms almost anyone because it removes the fight. It tells the other person, I care more about getting this right than being right. And that humility, it earns more respect than any clever comeback ever could. When your goal is to be understood, you also give yourself permission to communicate honestly without performance. You don't need to sound perfect. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to express your truth clearly and calmly. And if the other person still disagrees, that's fine, because being understood doesn't mean everyone has to agree with you. It means you were clear, authentic, and composed enough that your message was received, not lost in defensiveness. There's deep confidence in that. The kind that doesn't yell, doesn't rush, doesn't break character. It's the confidence of someone who knows their worth isn't tied to someone else's reaction. When your goal is understanding, not winning, you don't take things personally. You don't measure success by who gets the last word. You measure it by whether the conversation built clarity instead of chaos. And here's something powerful. Understanding works both ways. The more you focus on understanding others, the more they start understanding you. Because empathy is contagious. When you model it, you invite it back. It creates a space where both sides can drop their shields. That's where progress happens, not in shouting matches, but in still moments of mutual respect. Imagine how much calmer, stronger, and more confident your interactions would be if you stopped trying to win every one of them. If, instead of trying to dominate, you tried to connect, you'd stop wasting energy on arguments that don't matter and start investing it in relationships that do. You'd realize that listening doesn't make you powerless. It makes you persuasive. Because people follow those who make them feel heard, and when you carry that mindset into every conversation, at work, at home, in conflict, in negotiation, you'll notice something remarkable. People start to trust you. They open up more. They drop their guard faster. They respect your calm. Because you're not trying to overpower them. You're trying to understand them. And that's something very few people do. So if you want to change the way you communicate, stop aiming to win the moment and start aiming to win the person. The loudest person in the room rarely changes minds. The calmest one does. The one who listens with intention, speaks with clarity, and leads with empathy. That's what people remember. That's who people follow. Because in the end, the real victory in communication isn't walking away with the last word. It's walking away with respect. It's leaving the conversation better than you found it. It's knowing you showed up with grace, clarity, and control, no matter how heated things got. And when you do that, when you stop trying to win and start trying to understand, you don't just change conversations. You change outcomes. You change relationships. And maybe if enough people start doing it, you change the way we all talk to each other.